Good morning, Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to read verses 9 through 14. We're in this poetic section, in this larger section of darkness, and we're going to finish it, and it will conclude in verse 14 with some thoughts communicated in prose. This is, on the surface, easier to understand than the earlier verses in this poetic section, but there are some turns of phrase, and then the last phrase of the section, the last phrase of verse 14, really challenge us and boggle us. So let's read. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? It's not from wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. A better word to use instead of protection, and the NIV says shelter, my ESV says protection. The word is literally shade. I wish they'd just say shade. For the shade of wisdom is like the shade of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? In the day of prosperity, be joyful. And in the day of adversity, think. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. So much of this sounds like the New Testament, and wisdom that we know from the New Testament, especially at the beginning. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to get angry, because the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. These are identical in thought. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, but be patient in spirit. He's just said in verse 8 to be patient in spirit. A patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. Spirit, it can't be talking about our eternal souls, because he's taken eternity out of the equation. Our life force, the person that we are inside, the person that is the thinking part of us and the feeling part of us. Pride, no. Anger, not productive. Patience. And then, which is the attribute I do not have. I've only, in my life, found a way to work around having no patience, instead of acquiring any of it. And I will probably answer to the Lord for that one day. I will certainly answer to the Lord for that one day. Don't say, why were the old times better than these? That's foolish. That it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Times are always bad. They're just bad in different ways. And we remember things when we were young as being better because we were young then, and we didn't understand how bad things can get, and we were ignorant of how things can turn out, and we had a little more enjoyment from the things that we had in our lives, but it didn't change. That's just selfish. It's just self-centered a way of seeing things. You know, as Stevie Wonder points out in Pastime Paradise from Songs in the Key of Life back in the 70s. You know, he tells us the same thing. Times are not better or worse, they're just different. We think of times, our own times, we think of them as being so much more sinful than times before. No, the sins were just different. There were different sins that people were promoting and were accepting. And they're not acceptable now, so now there's a new, subset of sins that people think are okay, and they're doing those things. It's foolish to say that it didn't used to be so bad as it is now, because that's wrong. It has always been bad. Humans have always been sinful. Most people have always saw it. I mean, the New Testament tells us that. Romans chapter 3. Jesus tells us this in Matthew chapter 7. Most people do not bother to find the way of life, but follow blindly the way of destruction. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and an advantage to those who see the sun. Wisdom is good if you can use that wisdom. If you have enough resources that you can act on that wisdom, and if you have enough life to live a life based upon that wisdom, that's a little jaded, isn't it? Then it says the shade. So money and wisdom are not a shelter. We can't live in them, but they provide shade. They provide relief. He said other times, because he's thinking things through, wisdom is pointless, doesn't help. But now he says it does. It does help. In the way money helps. It can provide shade, a little relief from the glaring nature of how bad things are. You know, if you have enough resources, you can protect yourselves a little bit. If you have enough wisdom, you can also protect your. There are different. You don't have to be rich in order to just. There's another way to find some relief from the glaring nature of how bad life is on earth with human beings if there is no eternity. And wisdom can provide that kind of shade. Verse 13, consider the work of God. You can't undo what God does. We get that. But why does he say you can't make straight what God has made crooked? You can't fix what God has twisted up. I don't understand that. I don't understand that image, that metaphor. I understand that you cannot change what God has decreed. That I get. But why describe it in this way? And then verse 14, I love this so much, and yet I'm left with a big question mark in my mind. On the day of prosperity, be joyful, and the day of adversity, think. Wow. Put that on a bumper sticker. Tattoo that on your arm. I mean, that's the way to live life. In the day of prosperity, take joy in it. And in the day of adversity, then think. Think about it. Consider it. God has made the one as well as the other. And then there's this, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. I don't know how taking this advice and understanding that God has made one day as well as another then further obscures our understanding. I don't understand. I don't get it at all, the end of that verse. But I don't need to, do I? This is Solomon thinking things through, letting us in on the synapses of his brain, the circuitry of his brain as things fire around. And in the way our brains work, this stream of consciousness portrait of the way Solomon's brain is working, the way any of our brains are working, even those of us who have only a fraction, only a pinky fingernail of the wisdom that Solomon had. Our brains function the same way. And they don't function in a straight line. And we can reach the correct conclusion based upon the evidence, but then apply it the wrong way. Or apply it slant, because we don't have all the information processed yet. And that's what we're having to experience in the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay, we'll pick up with verse 15. We're entering a section which begins, in my vain life I've seen it all. And we'll listen to what he has to say about that next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5, nearly now 10 good minutes with the Word.